Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. I am Joe, and I'm your host every Tuesday evening right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 AM. And you can also catch us on Saturdays at 1 o'clock because we rebroadcast the show. If you want to check the show out streaming, you have to go to our website, WNRI.com, scroll down about 3/4 of the way. You'll see a window with the URL. Copy that and paste it at the top of your screen, and then you can stream the show. You can also catch us at tunein.com. And as a podcast, you can listen to this show on Spotify. So go to Spotify and just look for the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. So here we are. It's the middle of July. We're kind of on the backside of the summer. Hot, hazy, humid days, which is normal for summer in Rhode Island. And the market has not cooled. The real estate market has also continued to remain hot. I was just talking to someone right before we came on air, and it's not cooling, but it's taking a little bit longer for some homes to sell. Okay. And it's unfortunate that people have been spoiled, because after a week, people are like, why hasn't my house sold yet? Just reality check. It wasn't too long ago that homes were on the market for 3, 6, 9, sometimes 12 months before they sold. Now, granted, that was at the opposite end of the business cycle. So, we're at a point where we have more buyers than sellers, but rates have bounced around a bit. Employment ticked up a bit. So people are still buying. Values are still increasing. But the reality is homes aren't selling at the drop of a hat like they did before. And there are a number of reasons for that. But the intensity is still there. I just uploaded a couple of market updates for North Providence, Johnston, and Cumberland yesterday to the Spotify page, the Cup of Joe Luca page. And, the intensity in all three of those communities is still pretty strong. Okay. You're looking at, anywhere from 74, 75, 76 out of 100. So the intensity is still there for people buying homes. Now, the median price of a single family home in Rhode Island is about $460,000. So that's a lot. For first time home buyers to get into a home today, they need a household income of at least $100,000. Okay, so if mom and dad are each making $50,000, or you get the husband and the wife and the grandparents, or two partners, whatever the case may be, you need to have a good amount of income to buy a home today. And you're better off having better than inferior credit. So credit is one of those things. It's not just what you see on Credit Karma. There's a lot more that goes into your credit score. Credit Karma may be good for getting charge cards, things like that, like revolving credit. But to get something like car loans or a mortgage, especially, they do a different kind of a deep dive on your credit score. So that number that you may get on a Credit Karma, you can track what you're doing to show the steps you're taking are positive, but that's not, if you see a 680 on Credit Karma, that is not in all likelihood, the credit score that you'll get when a mortgage lender pulls up your credit. Okay, because they look at different. When you're buying a house, your mortgage is for 30 years. When you're getting a credit card, you're making smaller payments every month. Okay, so it's different, and that's unsecured, which is why the interest rates are so high. I saw a friend of mine posted something on Facebook the other day, and she had just opened up, I think it was a Kohl's charge, which is handled by Citibank. And the interest rate could be over 30%. Let that sink in. When I was a kid, people used to talk about loan sharks, the wise guys, the mafia guys, and that was the kind of interest that they charged. Now the banks are charging that, stores are charging that. So it's very important to manage your credit. Do not let yourself get in over your head. Ideally, you want to keep your credit utilization in the 10% range. If you have a credit card, you run it up by the end of the month or within the month, pay it down. Okay, don't pay it off entirely. You want to have some utilization. You don't want to have empty, unused credit cards. Keep something on there and then just make payments. So if you have a gas card, you run it up with $300 or $400 on there every month, pay it down to so there's only a balance of $35 within 30 days. That way you're demonstrating that you can manage your credit and you make your payments. Okay, and then you'll qualify for bigger credit lines and credit cards. Okay, I want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors. We're very grateful to have Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster Extraordinaire, 484-300-8495. That's 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville is a public insurance adjuster. Emphasis on public because he works for you, the property owner, not the insurance company. So he will work on your behalf to make sure that you receive all of the money you're entitled to on your insurance claim. This is for property, not for cars, okay? Also, GMET's Moving and Storage, premier mover in Southern New England. Please, if you have furniture to move or even a whole household, go to their website, gmetsmoving.com. That's G as in Gary, M as in Michael, E as in Edward, T as in Tom, Z as in Zebra, moving.com, and you can get a price quote or schedule a move on their website. If you do, mention the Joe Luca Real Estate Show so they know how you heard about them. But gmetsmoving.com, again, if you're just moving furniture so you can have your floors redone or have carpeting installed, they can handle it. Or if you're moving your whole house from Woonsocket to Westerly or Rhode Island to Florida, they can handle that too. They've moved my family, they've moved my friends, my colleagues. They do a fantastic job. And they're also good at moving hard to handle, awkward pieces, if it's art, if it's instruments, whatever it may be. That's GMET's Moving and Storage. They're doing a great job. And then also Compass Title and Escrow, Anthony Betancourt, Christine, and Camille. The whole team over there does a great job taking care of our buyers and our sellers of residential and commercial real estate. That's Compass Title and Escrow. They're right here in Lincoln at Blackstone Valley Place, easy to park, simple to get to off the highway. That's where we send our clients to use their services. That's Compass Title and Escrow. And I'm very fortunate in that I work with a lot of different lenders. Okay, I've worked with Don Miller at North Point Bank, this principal lender, very thorough, good educator of my clients. We have Dave Campagnon at Main Street Home Loans. Does a fantastic job. Dave has pulled rabbits out of the hat that I cannot believe how quickly he's gotten deals closed. And they were on my listing. It wasn't my buyers. He does a fantastic job. He's got really good relationships. He's very experienced and thorough and knows how to get it done. Of course, we also have John Dolbeck, longtime sponsor of the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. John's a good friend of mine, and he's also a veteran. He was a submariner, and awesome guy. So there are a lot of great lenders that I've had the pleasure of working with and I continue to work with. And the thread that runs through all of these lenders that I work with is they're local. They're not national. So they're right here. They support local charities. They get involved in their communities. Okay, coaching teams, sponsoring, soccer teams, football teams, whatever it is. That's what they do. They are part of the local community. And that's why I try to get all of our clients to use local lenders. Okay. And, if you're working with someone and you are just a file to them, like you're working with a lender who's halfway across the country, you are just a number to them. Okay. It's account XYZ 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the folder. This is the income. This is the purchase. There's no relationship there. It's very transactional. And I know in my business, as a realtor, I have built my business, my brand, by being relationship driven, not transaction driven. My goal, my objective is to add as much value to the transaction for my client, whether it's the buyer or the seller. Okay. I do not. It's not just about me moving them in, moving them out, getting it offer accepted, getting it closed, and moving on. I try to go above and beyond to make sure that my clients are making a good decision and they have all of the facts necessary so they don't have any lingering questions when they go to the closing table or after they close. Okay. That's how I conduct my business. And that's the lenders that I work with. That's how they conduct their business. The closing and title and escrow companies like Compass Title and Escrow, the same way they educate our consumers. That's what Vern Rainville does. And of course, that's what GMET's Moving does. Education is such a big part of the process of buying and selling a home because it's your largest investment, your largest financial transaction of your life. So you should have questions, and we should have answers for you. If you don't know what questions to ask, we should be providing those answers to you all the way through the process. Okay. So, one of the reasons I was talking with someone before the show again, and the market is still really strong. Homes are not selling as quickly as they were, but values are still going up. And you say, Jeepers, Joe, how much higher can they go? How much can buyers afford? Well, one of the things that makes it harder for people to afford a home, whether it's renting or buying, is when the government gets involved. Okay. And one of the things I want to talk about tonight is Biden's rent cap plan. And the question I put out there, is it harmful or is it helpful? Well, housing groups say it is harmful. So the White House today unveiled a plan which calls for capping rents at 5% per year on landlords who own more than 50 units. Now, that may sound like a lot, but it's not really a lot of units, okay? If you have someone that's what they do, that's how the family grows, and they're looking to assure their retirement or their legacy for their family. You get some 4-unit homes, a couple of 5-unit homes, 3-unit homes, and pretty soon you have 50 units. It's not like we're talking about 500 or 5,000 units. These are still small, locally, local people, okay? Family-owned, individually owned rental units. So Biden unveiled a proposal today that would take aim at high housing costs. And he's called to cap rent increases at 5% per year on, now he's calling them large landlords, but I beg to differ. Owning 50 units is not a large landlord. This is something even the National Association of Realtors have spoken out about, because this will ultimately not help renters. It will hurt renters. Quote, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, opposes misguided attempts to cap or control rental rates, unquote, says NAR President Kevin Sears, who's a Massachusetts guy, he's a friend of mine. Quote, price controls may seem appealing, but they have backfired on local governments and harmed people we need to help the most. Developers become reluctant to build in areas where the government imposes rent controls on new buildings. And then these policies actually decrease the supply of low to mid-range housing units. So Economics 101, when you decrease supply and demand remains the same, let's not even say demand is increasing. If supply goes down, prices go up. Okay, NAR has long advocated against rent control, calling such a policy, quote, an infringement upon private property rights. And they argue that property owners should have the right to set their rents at fair market rates. Now let that sink in for a minute, okay? If I'm a property owner, and let's say I want to charge $2,000 a month for my 2-bedroom apartment that I'm, and it's a tenement house. But then the guy 2 or 3 doors down, he's or she renting theirs at $1,700 a month. Well, where are people going to go first? They're going to go to that one first. So I'm going to, if I want to remain competitive, I have to lower my rent. Conversely, let's say we both have it set at $2,000 a month and we have more than enough people who are ready, willing, and able to pay $2,000 a month rent. Well, then what I would want to do is to get the best quality tenant possible. Maybe I'll charge a little bit more. So that way I have a better quality tenant. This is speaking very generally. Not all tenants who can pay a lot of money for rent are good tenants. But what it does is it reduces the potential pool of renters. So now the Housing Solutions Coalition, which includes the National Apartment Association, Mortgage Bankers Association, and the National Multifamily Housing Council, also spoke out against Biden's rent cap proposal in a statement. Quote, decades of academic research from across the United States and around the world clearly show that rent caps, more commonly known as rent control, reduce the supply of available housing and fail to target those renters who need help the most while simultaneously harming other residents and the communities they reside in. Rent caps hurt renters and hurt communities. Now, what happens in some cities, for example, in New York City, where they have rent control, I have an apartment that I rented 30 years ago, and I'm still on the lease, and it's rent controlled for $500 a month. But the fair market rent for that apartment may be $3,000 a month. So what a lot of people are doing in these cities with rent controls is they keep renewing the lease, and then they rent it out to someone else and they pocket the difference. So the landlord is losing out on receiving all of the value that his apartment generates, and it's going to the tenant who's on the lease. Now, obviously, if they are discovered that they're doing this, they'll get evicted, and it's a whole rigmarole. But if you take a city like Manhattan, look at New York City, there are millions and millions of people, and let's just say 1 million people out of the 6 million people that live there live in rent-controlled apartments. How much time what are the manpower resources does the city have to investigate this? What is the incentive? Okay. What can the landlord do? What do they have to do to investigate this? Okay, there are answers to these questions, but my point is these are the type of situations that rent control creates. Okay. Now, Biden's proposal would need to be approved by Congress to take effect. His plan calls for a rent cap that would only apply to larger landlords who oversee more than 50 units, which accounts for more than 20 million rental units nationwide, according to the White House. The plan excludes new construction and buildings that are substantially being renovated. So Biden says he's sending a clear message to landlords. And he's saying corporate landlords. If you raise rents more than 5% on existing units, you should lose valuable tax breaks, Biden said in a statement unveiling his plan. Rent is too high and buying a home is out of reach for too many working families and young Americans after decades of failure to build enough homes. I'm determined to turn that around. What he should be doing is he should be incentivizing the building of more apartment units, the building of more single-family units, the building of more co-ops or condominiums. Because more supply with consistent demand will reduce the fair market value. All right. About 22.4 million renter households are considered quote unquote cost burdened, spending more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities. That marks a record high. The number has grown by 2 million households over just the last 3 years, according to a recent report from the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University. Now, I take a lot of these statistics with a grain of salt. Okay. First of all, this comes out of Harvard University. Sometimes they have actually manipulated data to the advantage of folks who are sponsoring, i.e. paying for the study. Okay. Biden also announced Wednesday a call to repurpose federally owned land for building more affordable homes and renewed his previous push to build 2 million new homes. Quote, to lower housing costs for good, we need to build, build, build. Yes, you need to incentivize builders to build, cut down on the regulations, cut down on the taxes, cut down on the fees that they need to pay before they can put a shovel on the ground. Home builders say Biden's call for a rent cap could ultimately curtail new construction. Quote, President Biden's tax plan to cap rents at 5% on existing multifamily structures will worsen the housing affordability crisis by discouraging developers from building new rental housing units at a time when the nation is experiencing a shortfall of 1.5 million housing units. That's from Carl Harris, chairman of the National Association of Home Builders. These rent caps would also hurt existing tenants, those that the president is trying to help, because owners and developers would be unable to cover rising costs if rents are fixed. So if you can't raise rents more than 5% and we have inflation at 3% per year, that means it's really only 2% that you're looking at to increase the rents. Well, now what happens if water and sewer fees go up? What if we've had 20% inflation on homeowners insurance the past couple of years? Then you get taxed on all of that income that comes in, but some of that is getting eaten up by inflation as well. So it's a double tax. Let that sink in. Okay. We need to build more homes for people to own. We need to build more homes that people can rent. Okay. The Builders Group has called for policies that focus on increasing the rental housing supply, like strengthening the low-income housing tax credit to finance the production of more affordable rental housing. The National Association of Realtors also has long advocated for states and municipalities to adopt zoning laws and building codes, as well as other legislation, to encourage the construction of more rental units. Maybe allow them to build taller buildings. So in a neighborhood where they're all three-level homes, let them go up 4 or 5 levels. Maybe make the apartments a little bit smaller. Make the setbacks on the property lines a little bit smaller. This will allow more rental units per square foot. Okay. Quote, policymakers should look at the tax code to incentivize the development of affordable housing units, not punish housing providers, says Shannon McGann from the National Association of Realtors. She's our chief advocacy officer. Quote, we need more than 328,000 new apartment units each year to keep up with demand. That's 4.3 million units by 2035. This plan would dig us further in a hole and harm the very people it purports to help. Government should work together at all levels to create not just more rental units, but also the wide array of all housing types needed to remedy the affordability crisis. So, accessory dwelling units, make it easier, which we've already taken these steps in Rhode Island and in other states, to make it easier to have an accessory dwelling unit on your home, either by finishing a basement, converting the garage, or converting the space above a garage. That way grandma, grandpa, or your adult kids can live there. Okay. Tiny houses. That's something else that we can look at. If you have the land and your municipality allows the construction of a tiny house, on the property, that would alleviate the pressure for new housing, the shortage of new homes. Okay. Make it easier for people to increase the size of their buildings for rentals. Okay. If you have tenement houses and you've got a house, it's 3 units, 3 levels, 3 units, maybe you could make it a little bigger, add a 4th unit. either by going up or going out, depending on how much land is there. So these are the types of things that would help and not hurt, not harm the housing supply, not harm the people that these rent caps are trying to help. These rent caps will hurt landlords and they will hurt tenants even more. Okay? Because if it's not cost effective for someone to buy buildings or build buildings with rental units, they won't do it. And what happens if you own a property that's a rental unit and you can only increase your rents 5% per year, 3% gets eaten up by Biden's inflation, and then you have other increasing costs like insurance, like water and sewer, mandated, you have to have, other building codes that are mandated that you have to do to your home, your rental property. At what point is it that the smaller landlord, and I would consider someone that owns 50 units, that's not a big landlord. That is still going to be a family operated or owned business many times. At what point is it that they can't afford to keep the property, to maintain the property? They can't raise rents. Taxes go up every year or every couple of years. So if you have 3% inflation, you have insurance rates that are increasing, you have taxes that are increasing. It doesn't take long to eat up any rental profits that you have. And they're forcing you to not increase your rents to what fair market value would allow. Fair market value is the amount that a consumer would pay to rent an apartment or buy a home. I've heard some people, some talking heads, they complain about realtors that we are the reason that home prices are as high as they are. In Rhode Island at $461,000 for a single family home. That's the median price. We do not set the price. Okay, if I set the price and listed a $450,000 home for $475,000, and no one was willing to pay $475,000, the value of the home is not $475,000. Now, if I set it at $475,000 and somebody comes in and pays $465,000, well, that's still higher than the $450,000. So the value of that home is $465,000. The marketplace, the consumer, is establishing the value of the home. Rental units, the consumer is establishing the value of the apartments. Okay. I rented an apartment for a friend of mine. It's a 1-bedroom apartment that she and her husband did over. Really nice. Rented it for $1,600. I had more prospective tenants than I could shake a stick at who were willing to pay $1,600 for a 1-bedroom apartment in Pawtucket. Maybe we could have gotten $1,700. I don't know. We didn't want to keep it empty for an extra month, because if we kept it empty for an extra month, maybe we would get $1,700, but you just lost $1,600 of an opportunity cost to make an extra $100 a month for 12 months. Okay, so we tore through all of the applicants and found someone that the landlords were really comfortable with, and that's who rented the apartment. Okay. Folks, you are listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 FM, 1380 on the AM dial. You can also catch us on Spotify as a podcast. And we rebroadcast the show every Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. You can hear us on tunein.com as well. So we've been talking about the supply of homes, demand, rentals. I want to talk a little bit about the housing market in general. I have a lot of information here and only about 20 minutes to go through it. Today the housing market is very different than it was before the pandemic. Okay. If we look at some numbers, the 30-year mortgage rate, which is what people use to finance their purchase, has gone from about 3.6, 3.7% all the way up. I mean, it was up to about 7.5%. Now it's just a touch below. Let me see what it is as of today on my rusty, trusty Mortgage News Daily. And the interest rate as of today for 30-year fixed rate, 6.84. 30-year FHA, 6.28. 30-year VA, 6.3. So these are a little bit lower than they've been in the past. They're up a touch from yesterday, but they're still a lot higher than the 3.5%, 3.6% we had back in 2020. So surging mortgage rates and housing prices have taken away some of the consumer's purchasing power. Low supply of houses has kept it very competitive. And as a result, the affordability has tumbled dramatically from the days of the pandemic because interest rates are higher and prices are higher. So it costs more money. Okay. Higher prices can elicit different feelings by group. For hopeful homeowners, it can raise red flags as they're trying to prepare to buy a home. But for current homeowners, it's a sign of comfort. Okay. The National Association of Realtors has some data. It's called the NAR Housing Affordability Index. Okay. That was at about 75, 170, 175 back in 2020. And now it's down to about 93.1. Okay, so housing affordability is about half what it was before. So it's a big drop. It's a big drop. The Atlanta Federal Reserve's gauge showed that the economic feasibility of homeownership plummeted more than 36% when comparing April to the pandemic high seen in the summer of 2020. Another way the Atlanta Fed tracks this is through the share of income needed by the typical American to afford the median home. Nationally, it last required 43% of pay, which is well above the 30% marker considered the threshold for affordability. So essentially that means lenders like to see your debts, be at about 30% for your mortgage, and it's up to 43%. So it's a little bit higher than they want it to be. Okay. So housing, again, this is just, it really exacerbates the problems that consumers are experiencing every day. When you go to the gas station, gas is twice what it was 3.5 years ago. You go to pay your electric bill, you pay your insurance on your car and your home. Those are up 20%. Okay, you go to the supermarket. I was talking with someone today, and she was behind someone at the market who bought organic milk. It was $7 a gallon. I know that because we have organic milk at my house. It's very expensive. Ground beef, ham. I mean, these are crazy numbers that are up significantly. And so these are the things that the consumer has to deal with every day. They encounter this every day. And then when they want to go out and try and participate in the American dream of home ownership, they're kicked in the teeth again because the mortgage rates are so high. The prices are so high. Now it's like Jeepers Crow. My wife and I, my girlfriend and I, my partner and I, we need to make $120,000 a year between the two of us in order to afford a home, not an elaborate home. So if we could get interest rates to come down back into the fives, that would release a lot of capital that people could use to buy homes. It would also possibly incentivize current homeowners to sell so they could downsize or upsize. So it would have an additional effect of increasing inventory. Okay. Um, so that's something that should be considered. Consumer Federation of America, okay, is back this time with recommendations for real estate brokerages and organizations working to create new and revised buyer agency agreements ahead of the August 17th deadline set by the DOJ and the National Association of Realtors. This watchdog group has been keeping a close eye, air quotes, close eye on buyer agreements and the other consumer-facing real estate forms in recent weeks, offering harsh criticism for some and praising others. So what this means is they're referring to a buyer agreement. The Department of Justice, the government, does not want home sellers to have to pay any money to the buyer's agent. So if you're a buyer and you have a buyer's agent representing you and your best interests, that buyer's agent is going to have to look to the buyer to receive compensation, because the federal government does not want the seller to pay anything towards the buyer's compensation, the buyer's agent's compensation. So what's happening is we have to have buyer agreements, just like we have listing agreements with sellers. I will list your home at 123 Main Street for this price for this period of time to sell your home. I will represent you as a buyer in these geographic areas for this period of time, and you agree to pay me X percent. Okay. Now that X percent, sometimes we can ask the seller to pay for it. Sometimes it can be possibly worked into the mortgage. There are a lot of different ways that we can get there. But that's what this Consumer Federation of America is referring to. They are providing specific guidelines intended to, quote unquote, assess the fairness of buyer agreements. So they've established this checklist of 15 items to help ensure buyer agreements are readable, transparent, and fair to consumers. So we're going to go through this. I'm going to offer you my commentary throughout. So they have 4 initial criteria which are focused on the structure and readability of the agreement. So 1, overall length. The Consumer Federation of America didn't specify how long the contract should be, but they applauded a short 1.5-page agreement that they saw from a company called EXP. 2, type size. The Consumer Federation of America said anything smaller than a 12-point font, quote, will be difficult for some people to read, unquote. So you can't have, 2.5 pages of text with a small font that you need a magnifying glass to read. 3, organization. The most important aspects of the agreement, such as compensation, quote, should be at the beginning of the document and clearly labeled. 4, plain language, quote, the contract should be written so that it can be understood by home buyers, unquote. The CFA added that complex lawyer speak should be avoided. Now, in Rhode Island, we have a form. It's brief and everything embodies everything that we say here. It's a pretty short form. It's 2 pages. It is a font that's larger than 12 points. I don't know exactly what it is. The compensation is at the beginning of the document, and it is clearly labeled. Well, actually, is it at the beginning? It's at the top of the 2nd page. So maybe it's not at the beginning. I withdraw that claim. In plain language, it is as simple as can be. We're talking about something that is legally enforceable, so there has to be some use of verbiage that has, legal standing. Okay. The CFA also laid out 11 specific items that should be included in a buyer agreement. 1, length of the contract term, which I mentioned. Okay. Any contract for it to be enforceable has to have a beginning date and an end date, which is number 2, the termination. So we're going to have a 12-month contract that starts on July 16th, 2024 and ends on July 15th, 2025. Or if it's 6 months, make the adjustment. 3, disclosure that compensation is negotiable. I may want to charge my buyers X percent, but the buyer may say, you know what, Joe, I understand that your compensation is important to you, but I would like to pay you less than that because I can't afford it. Okay. And there are different ways that we can arrive at those numbers, and we have done that. And this is something you would talk to your realtor about when you are meeting with him or her, because everything is negotiable. Okay. The compensation amount is, if it's a set dollar amount, that has to be included. When the compensation is to be paid, typically it's at closing. Sometimes some of my colleagues require a transaction fee to be paid up front. And the reason for that is because especially now, if we have to look at 50 houses over a 2-month period, driving all around, that's a lot of gas and a lot of time invested by the realtor. And realtors don't sell houses as much as we sell our time, knowledge, and experience. So sometimes it makes sense for a realtor to say, okay, this is what the transaction fee is going to be, or I'm going to need a deposit up front that will be returned to you at closing or subtracted from the fees paid to me. Continuing obligation to compensation. So if it needs to go on beyond, so let's say the buyer doesn't have all of the monies to pay the compensation, well, they can spread it out over a period of months. Seller concessions, if they're necessary, that should be included in this buyer agreement. Dual agency disclosure. So if I'm representing the buyer and the seller, this is something that would be disclosed on another form that is required by law. It's called a relationship disclosure form. And then with one of the parties, the realtor would have to be a transaction facilitator and would be a designated client representative for the other party. Conflict of interest. This has to be disclosed. So if I'm selling my own house or my parents' house or my siblings' home, or I owned a part of this home, part of this property that's being sold by a company, we have to disclose that. Okay, and then it has to show buyer remedies. Okay, buyer remedies are if things go wrong, what are the remedies a buyer has to relieve themselves of the obligations? Okay. One of the things that they want to do is focus on the readability first. If the forms don't meet the first 4 criteria, so it's readable and understandable, it's going to be much harder to accomplish the other 11 criteria. In coming up with their recommendations, the CFA researchers reviewed more than 40 buyer agreements, and in the process singled out the California Association of Realtors, specifically its 4-page draft buyer agreement that the group described as, quote, far too disorganized and complex for the average home buyer to understand, unquote. Additionally, they criticized California Association of Realtors' 7,000-word, 7-page listing agent contract. So they had a really verbose listing contract and a very verbose buyer agent contract. CFA said that after receiving scrutiny from DOJ, the California and CFA, the California Association of Realtors made significant improvements to the content of their forms. So they're basically going up the white flag saying, okay, we'll make the changes necessary. It appears that the industry is being trapped by the state associations and their attorneys, and that the national office is not pushing hard enough on the states to dramatically improve some of the contract we've seen, he said. Now, I need to point something out here. The National Association of Realtors represents about 1.5 million realtors. Now, we have what's called a 3-party agreement. You have a local board of realtors in this part of the state. It's called the Northern Rhode Island Board of Realtors. Then you have the state association. The local boards are part of the state association. The local boards are run independently. They have their own staff, their own volunteer leaders that's independent of the state association. So if I'm a president of a local board or CFO of a local CEO of a local board, my best interest, I'm looking to represent the members of my local board and what's in their best interest. That may not be in agreement with the state association. And what the state wants to do may not be in agreement with the national association. So they really don't have, it's not like a master and servant relationship that the National Association They can't say, like the federal government, you have to do this. I mean, even the federal government can't do it. I mean, we have this thing called states' rights, and states can do what they want. State associations can do what they want. The National Association cannot force. They can encourage, they can try and persuade, but they can't force. Okay. One of the things too is that we're independent minded entities and individuals. Realtors are not employees. They work as independent contractors for the broker. And they volunteer their time to participate in volunteer leadership at their local board, state association, or national association. I've done all three. And I'm only saying that because I understand the challenges that they each have and how difficult it can be to get everything to line up. Okay. I mean, just look at the Northern Rhode Island Board of Realtors. We have different needs for our members, or our members have different wants and needs than the Newport County Board of Realtors. Okay. Same state, different ends of the state, different sets of needs. The state of Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, has needs that are overarching for all of our local boards. We also have what's called a commercial overlay board. It's a very small board for commercial practitioners. Okay. So the Consumer Federation of America, I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it easier for the consumer to read and understand the buyer agreement. Ideally, if a consumer didn't understand something, their realtor should be able to explain it. However, in the absence of that, then you should probably get an attorney to explain it, because it's important that the consumer understand what they need to sign, whether it's a listing agreement for the seller or the exclusive buyer agreement for the buyer. Okay, it's not easy. It's very simple, but it's not necessarily easy to keep everyone happy. So we're going through this transition right now. A lot of my colleagues are very upset. They're trying to adapt. I think in the long run, it will, probably work out well, but it's going to be tough for buyers who can't afford to pay buyers' agents. So what's going to happen? Are they going to not have representation? They're going to work directly with the listing agent who works for the seller, has the seller's best interest at heart, is not required to disclose anything about the home unless specifically asked by the buyer. Okay, I've been in thousands of homes. I know I have lots of questions that I know about asking, and I can make lots of observations when walking through a home that the average consumer would never think to ask or look for. Yeah, the average person buys 2, 3, 4 homes. That's a lot. 4 would be a lot. Okay. I've been involved in hundreds of transactions, been in thousands of homes, and there's not much I haven't seen. And I just say that because that's value that I add to my clients' transactions. Because I can see things that they may not see, and I can point it out to them and like, oh my gosh, Joe, thank you for pointing that out. I don't want this house. Or, oh my gosh, Joe, wow, that's really good that you saw that, because that's value that the seller's unaware of, what the listing agent was unaware of when they were pricing this home. Okay. A good realtor will add lots of value to the transaction, mitigate unnecessary stressors from the transaction. If everything is perfect, financing is perfect, the move is perfect, there are no title issues, it's still stressful to buy a home or sell a home because you're packing up all your stuff and you're paying someone to move it from point A to point B. Maybe things are going to break, maybe not. Then you have to get everything set up. You've got to clean, you've got to unpack. If you have kids, get them registered for their schools. These are all things that make it more stressful than It has to be. I mean, there are things that I can do and my team that we can help you with to reduce the stress and make the transaction proceed more smoothly. That's one of the things that we do. Sometimes there will be clients who are asking questions or inquiring about putting contingencies into an offer. And sometimes, I'll do whatever you want, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, as far as contingencies, but why do you want to put that in there? Oh, because someone told me it's really important to do it. Okay, who was that? Have they bought a home? Or have they sold homes? Are they a realtor? Are they an attorney? Because sometimes you put things in there that really aren't necessary, aren't providing much protection because, okay, talking about like a survey. Okay, what if the survey comes up and what would make you not want to proceed with the home? If the plot lines provided by the municipality property lines were 5 feet off, 2 feet off, 25 feet off, okay, what do you need to have? I mean, if you're looking at where the property is, that's great. Now, that being said, if let's say it's like, well, Joe, I need to put a tennis court or a basketball court or a swimming pool, and I need at least this much space because it has to be this far from the fence line. Okay, then you need to get a survey. You need to know exactly where your property lines are. Most people, if it's off a couple of feet one direction or the other, it's not a big deal. Now, if you're fighting with your neighbors, then it does become a big deal. But usually when someone's buying a home, they're looking to make friends with their neighbors. They're not looking to make enemies. Okay. So if you have questions about any of this, please reach out 401-580-9797. That's my direct cell phone number. You can call or text me at 401-580-9797, and I'll get you some answers to your questions. Okay. I want to thank our sponsors, Compass Title and Escrow, Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster, 484-300-8495, and GMETS Moving and Storage. You can check them out at gmetsmoving.com. You can book your move or get a price for your move if you go to that website. We'll be back here next week, same bat time, same bat channel, 99.9 FM, 1380 AM WNRI. Look forward to seeing you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Just wanted to say thank you to God for protecting our President Trump, hopefully soon to be the next president, because that could have been very unfortunate if God's hand did not intervene. We'll be back next week, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Bye-bye.